Good morning and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very special episode today on the AM Mix presented by Umesh, Chandra and brought to you by the courtesy of Australian Indian Radio. Well, wonderful news. First of all, it's congratulations to Honourable Dr. Stephen Miles on your selection as the next Premier of Queensland. We are awaiting the official announcement, which is due on Friday. But nevertheless, from Australian Indian Radio, Brisbane Indian Times, we would like to wish you all the very best in the new role and looking forward to working together with you. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date. But today, today's show is more focused on the United Nations Human Rights Day. And as we know that the Human Rights Day, the declaration was on the 10th of December. But today we are going to look at some of the functions and events that have taken place in and around the Brisbane. So, when we look at the Human Rights Day, the Dignity, Freedom and Justice for All, the 75th anniversary program, which took place yesterday at St. John's Cathedral in Ann Street in Brisbane, and what a beautiful venue it is. So we had the Brisbane Combined Union Choir, and they did a wonderful job. Welcome was by the Dean of Brisbane, Reverend Peter Catt, and then the welcome address by Professor Susan Harris-Rimmer. The special address was by Her Excellency the Honourable Dr. Jeanette Young, ICPSM, and the appreciation by Clyde Campbell, OIM, Combined Union Choir, and this took place yesterday, and it was good. So we will look at a few of the glimpses of the event and as how it took place. So in 1945, United Nations Charter took the catalyst to World War II to propel human rights into global stage. And into the total, in 1946, the Commission of Status of Women, established by ECOSOC. So in 1948, Universal Declaration of the Rights adopted on 10 December 1948. The declaration is a call to freedom and justice for people throughout the world. It stipulates universal values for the shared standard of achievement for everyone in every country. In 1989, the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and in 2019, Queensland Human Rights Act. The Declaration of the Human Rights declares that human rights are the universal and to be enjoyed by all people, no matter who they are and where they live. The Universal Declaration includes civil rights, political rights, and the right to life, liberty, and free speech. So, what is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? We must stand firm against rising intolerance and build a future of dignity, security, justice, and human rights for all. This was by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a force for good which has been translated into more than 550 different languages. Universal Declaration of Human Rights was proclaimed by United Nations General Assembly in Paris on 20th December 1948. Universal Declaration of Human Rights will guide solutions to global challenges, cultural rights, and the protection of cultural heritage. The future of human rights and the digital technologies, the future of human rights and peace and security, the future of human rights, climate and environment, the future of human rights, development and economy, and the future Human Rights Act 2019 Queensland came into effect on 1st of January 2020. So there's a bit of a background into that. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a special guest was Her Excellency the Honourable Dr. Jeanette Young, ICPSM, the Governor of Queensland, and was born in Sydney in 1963. We'll hear from her. And of course, the guest speaker, special guest speaker, was Professor Renee Zepri, Professor of International Relations, Australian Research Council Future Fellow. Renee's research focuses on issues reflected to conflict, justice, and human rights in the Asia Pacific. She was conducted and fieldworks in and published specific cases of Cambodia, Nepal, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands, Timor-Leste, Japan, Philippines, and the Taiwan. So since 2009, she has been awarded the Australian Research Council grant and is the former editor of both the Australian Journal and the Political Science and the Journal of Global Securities and Studies. So we will, in a minute, look at all of this. And as I mentioned, that all of this took place yesterday at the St. John's Cathedral, a beautiful place, as I've mentioned before. It is always so good to be there. Let's join in. And the sound, because of the acoustics in the building, might be a little bit echoey.
and the committee and members of the Queensland Division of the United Nations and many other organisations here tonight in their continued commitment to promoting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I hope we all pray that one day those rights will truly be universal.
Nature of what it means to be in Australia. Human rights, went on to say, are integral to what we as Australians regard as our sense of nationhood. We are, he concluded, a nation built on, a belief in and a commitment to the human rights of all, the human rights of all Australians, and the human rights of all the peoples of the world. In one sense, this is underpinned the foreign policy that is overtly committed to advancing human rights through multilateral institutions and bilateral dialogues, and which views human rights both as intrinsic goods and as a foundation on which peace and prosperity are built. Yet Australian foreign policy is also marked by a deep reluctance to impose values on others, to take consistent and decisive action against countries that systematically violate their population's human rights, or to speak up against some of the world's most egregious abuses. It is also a foreign policy developed in a context in which Australia is facing considerable criticism for its program of human rights reform. Australia's most recent Universal Periodic Review in 2021 provided a decidedly mixed assessment of its human rights performance. On the positive side, the Human Rights Council Working Group welcomed progress made in the realisation of human rights in Australia since the 2015 review. But it also raised serious concerns about mandatory detention and asylum seekers, the rights of children with regard to the age of criminal responsibility, and the rights of Indigenous people, in particular discrimination, inequality, and the high rate of incarceration amongst First Nations people. Australia has also been reluctant to implement recommendations made by these same institutions. Less than 10% of the recommendations made during the 2011 review were implemented in the required timeframe. In 2015, the United Nations Human Rights Committee castigated Australia for its habit of picking and choosing which international human rights laws and treaties to follow. The committee's vice chair, remarked in this regard that Australia's behaviour was, quote, incredible for a country that claims to have a leading role in human rights. So what explains Australia's at times contradictory, often hypocritical, and perennially uncomfortable engagement in the global human rights regime? So to do so, I'm going to briefly revisit the history of human rights in Australia and show how the pursuit of national unity, by which I mean racial unity for much of its history, and especially prosperity, have shaped and continue to shape its approach to human rights. Now, much of that history is specifically Queensland history. It's no secret that much of our state's human rights history is appalling. And while there is no denying or minimising that past, a perhaps lesser known part of our history centres on those who stood up against the ill treatment of others, and in doing so contributed to the development of human rights in Queensland and in Australia. There's an important story too that I'm going to touch on.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date. Our apologies for the sound quality because of the ambience in the venue. A beautiful venue it is, I must say. And probably next time we'll have to make some other arrangements. But it was wonderful to see the number of people who came up, and the event ended up with a supper for everyone and a bit of fellowship around there. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. And once again, as I mentioned in the very beginning of the show, that we'd like to wish the incoming new Premier of Queensland, on the Honourable Dr. Stephen Miles, all the very best in the role, and looking forward to that announcement on this Friday. And of course, we know that will lead us into the by-election for the Inala once that is announced, most probably by the end of December. So there are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on the AMX show. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us. It's always good to have your company. And look, as I mentioned before, if there's any thing that you'd like to see differently on the program, we'd love to hear from you. But until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us.